Inside the human body, a universe of astonishing structures. The internal wonders of nature that enable us to live for nearly a century. Using extraordinary medical footage, state-of-the-art special effects, and groundbreaking 3D animation, we embark on an incredible voyage through flesh and blood. From first breath to last. This is a life story, told from a unique perspective, inside a living body. For this fetus, it has already been an astonishing 40-week journey from single cell to baby girl. But the tranquility of her world is about to be shattered by the ordeal of labor. Childbirth is painful and traumatic for both mother and child. The baby responds with a surge of adrenaline. For this baby, the most dangerous moments of her life are upon her. There's no air in her lungs, just amniotic fluid. Seconds old, there's a risk of suffocation before even drawing breath. The adrenaline takes immediate effect. The diaphragm tenses and the ribs lift. The lungs splutter into life. This is the first of 700 million breaths. Air rushes down the trachea and through thousands of branching bronchioles. Oxygen is finally absorbed through nearly 30 million tiny air sacs, the alveoli. Each exhalation rids the body of the waste gas, carbon dioxide. The lungs are the last organs to activate, and the physical link between mother and baby can be severed. For the first time, this tiny baby will rely on all her own organs to keep her alive. The heart, no bigger than a walnut, has already been pumping for more than 8 months. But at birth, there's a flaw, a hole between 2 chambers. In fact, it's not a defect, but a vestige of life before birth. In the womb, the hole diverted blood away from the inactive lungs. But now they're fully functioning, so a flap of tissue seals it shut. Now working normally, the baby's heart pumps blood through thousands of miles of blood vessels. And in the minutes after she's born, other organs are also adapting. Her digestive tract is already full, even before her first meal. Instead of food, a sticky green-black tarry substance called meconium, the remnants of part-digested amniotic fluid and dead cells. Here in the gut, meconium is harmless, but in some babies it can end up in the lungs during labour, attacking the delicate lining. Normally, the first feeds flush out meconium. From now on, she will consume about half a litre of breast milk every day. The trauma of birth might now be over, but the business of adapting to life outside the womb has only just begun. A newborn baby in the first months of life. Infancy is the time we grow most rapidly and begin to make sense of the world around us. All of us, regardless of size, are miracles of microscopic design. A multitude of tissues and organs, each made up of billions of these. Cells. Cells are the building blocks of the body. They make us what we are. 100,000 billion cells, more than the number of stars in the Milky Way. These cells divide and replicate, enabling us to grow faster in infancy than ever again. Inside each and every cell, a world within a world. Tiny structures called organelles work together to keep the cell functioning. The largest organelle, the nucleus, houses molecules of DNA, the double helix that makes us who we are. This genetic code not only determines our unique looks and character, but also sets out the timeline of our development. It decides when we grow, how we age, and often when we die. But who we are and who we become will also be shaped by the world around us. Even before we learn to think, the brain is already making 100 trillion simultaneous calculations every second. Infant brains are so overwhelmed that even basic functions like trying to keep the body warm are simply too much. Within the base of the brain is the region we use for temperature control, the hypothalamus. Just like the rest of the brain, it's immature and struggling to cope. Worse, the newborn's tiny size makes her highly susceptible to heat loss. Evolution, however, provides the perfect backup plan. We're born with a unique tissue, normally found in hibernating animals. It's fat. Not just any old baby fat, but this brown fat. Much more than an insulating layer, it's packed with special cells that actively generate heat by burning nutrients. Brown fat is only a temporary solution. Most of this fat will disappear as the body grows. With the brain still developing in the early part of infancy, the body relies on reflexes to survive. Young babies have no more control over behaviours like gripping and rooting for a nipple than the urge to breathe. As breast milk enters the stomach, its role goes far beyond nutrition. It's a baby's secret weapon against an unseen enemy. Bacteria. Incredibly, there are 10 times more bacterial cells in and on the body than human cells. We are all of us coated in them. But unlike adults, infants' immature immune systems leave them open to infection. Fortunately, a mother's immunity can still work on her baby's behalf. Close contact means both bodies face the same pathogens. So when the mother's immune system creates antibodies against them, she can share them with her baby in a feed. Protected by her mother's antibodies over the following months, the baby will soon be ready to fight her own battles. For a baby, the world is a strange and terrifying place. To their virgin senses, it's noisy, bright, and above all, smelly. High up inside the nose, the olfactory nerves turn airborne chemicals into nerve impulses to the brain. Smell is the first sense to develop in the womb, and in the weeks after we're born, we rely on it more than any other sense. We can even recognize our mother by smell alone. After the muffled sounds of the womb, the outside world bombards us with a cacophony of unfamiliar noises. Sound waves cause the eardrums to vibrate against the ossicles, the tiniest bones in the body. Incredibly, these are the only bones that never grow throughout our lives. Ossicles are levers. They amplify the sound by a factor of 22 and transmit the vibrations into this, the cochlea. Inside this snail-like spiral, vibrations are converted into nerve impulses via delicate hairs called stereocilia. At the top, hairs used for low frequencies. At the base, extremely fragile, high-frequency hairs, 200 times thinner than the hairs on your head. Over time, loud noise will damage these hairs, but as they're all intact at this age, we hear a wider frequency range than we ever will again. Infant eyesight, however, is a very different story. In our first weeks, the world looks blurry and devoid of colour. It's because the eye is still a work in progress. All lenses invert light. Our brain flips it the right way up. But in infancy, immature lenses make focusing light difficult. And the reason babies have problems seeing colour is in the retina, the screen at the back of the eye. These cells, rods and cones, turn light into impulses to the brain. But the ones used for coloured light, the cones, are still developing. The impulses travel from eyes to brain via the optic nerves. But once the image arrives inside the brain, there's another problem. The developing neurons can't yet interpret the data. Over the next months, the eyes rapidly develop. At the age of 2 months, we can distinguish colours and shades. At 4 months, we can identify facial patterns. And finally, by 8 months, we should have 20/20 vision. Over the same period of time, some babies' eyes undergo another amazing transformation. DNA instructs the cells of the iris to begin making pigments. The result is an explosion of colour in the eye as strikingly individual as the whirl of a fingerprint. By 8 months, all the senses are working fully. But we're most in tune with one of them, the sense of touch. When we touch something, receptors in fingertips send electrical impulses through the sensory nerves in the skin, along the spinal cord, and into the brain. The impulses travel fast, over 200 miles per hour. But sometimes even this is too slow. Painful objects, like a hot tap, force the body into taking a shortcut. The spinal cord intercepts pain messages and instantly bounces back a reflex response. Touch receptors are scattered all over the skin, but sensitive areas like hands, face and mouth are covered with densely packed nerve endings. There are 9,000 receptors on the tongue alone, a reason babies use their mouths to explore the world around them. But there's another reason for all that gnawing. Teething. Milk teeth form deep in the gums while still in the womb. It's only now they painfully announce their existence as they erupt from their slumber one by one. And once we have a full set, there's no limit to what we can eat. Chewing breaks up food ready for digestion, while saliva from glands under the tongue begins breaking down its biochemical structure. Saliva also provides lubrication for its journey to the depths. Waves of contracting muscle keep food moving in a process called peristalsis. The contractions down the esophagus are so powerful, you can even eat standing on your head. The food drops down through a hole in the roof of the stomach. This bag of muscle both liquidizes lunch and attacks it with a powerful acid. This acid is so corrosive, the stomach has to protect itself with a thick layer of mucus. Without it, we'd digest ourselves from inside out. In babies, it's about an hour before the stomach squeezes the broken down food through a tiny hole called the pyloric sphincter. It moves on into the small intestine. In infancy, this coil of tube is already 4 meters long. Eventually, it will grow to a length of over 9 meters. To neutralize the acid, the food is first doused in pancreatic juice, then bile from the liver to break down fats into tiny droplets. To make nutrient absorption possible, the small intestine is lined with millions of microscopic finger-like projections called villi. Villi enormously increase the intestine's surface area. In adults, to the size of a tennis court. An hour and a half later, food enters the large intestine. Through this amazing structure, the ileocecal sphincter, a valve designed to stop food going backwards. The large intestine's main job is to extract water. What's left is a combination of waste food, dead cells, and lots of bacteria. But most bacteria found here are the friendly kind. They produce enzymes that break down complex carbohydrates in our food, carbohydrates the body can't otherwise digest. Finally, what remains of the meal leaves the rectum. As we move on to solid foods, the amount of calories we can consume increases dramatically. Each and every calorie is used not just for growth, but also to fuel our newfound mobility. First on 4 limbs, then on 2. The key to taking our first steps is not in our legs, but hidden deep in our ears. Here, there are 3 looping structures, the size of a penny. The semicircular canals may live in the ears, but they have nothing to do with hearing. They're filled with liquid and work a bit like spirit levels, orientated in 3 planes. As the liquid triggers sensor hairs in the tubes, they create nerve impulses which keep the brain informed about orientation and momentum. And once we've mastered balance, we're one step closer to learning to walk. As a toddler, we're ready to take the next leap in life, learning to engage our brain. From infancy to childhood, the human body continues its rapid development. But while the external changes in our appearance are obvious, developments inside the body are even more profound.
Cheese!
Most of us learn to talk by our first birthday, but by 2 years old, we're learning an incredible 10 new words a day. Called the Broca's area, this is a region at the side of the brain used for language. It gives us the ability to both understand and produce speech. Language allowed our ancestors to pass on knowledge through generations of storytelling. And it's this that gave us the evolutionary edge over the rest of the animal kingdom. Through language, we evolved the ability to communicate complex information and other distinctly human traits. In childhood, we become aware of our own identity and individuality. We become conscious of ourselves as individuals. And for the first time, we begin forming memories we retain our whole lives. Like our first day at school. If you could magnify the scene inside the brain thousands of times, this is something like what you'd see. A mass of over 100 billion brain cells. These neurons communicate using electric impulses, each impulse a tiny fraction of our thoughts. Children learn because neurons aren't permanently connected. So when we see or hear something new, Brain cells put out tendrils called axons, which seek out and form new connections with other neurons. At the meeting point, the synapse, chemicals called neurotransmitters bridge the gap to allow the impulse to continue the chain. The brain forms a new memory as millions of neurons form new patterns of connection. The more we repeat something, the stronger the reinforcement, the more likely the memory will stick.
What does the word veteran mean?
So years later, when we're asked to recall the memory, the same pattern of connections we made fires up, and we remember the answer. And because the brain grows quickly when we're children, millions of new connections are being made all the time. Learning through trial and error is an essential component of human childhood. But sometimes, by testing the limits of what we can achieve, we take risks. In youth, we are programmed to try out new things. Only by doing this can the brain develop fully. But when we push things too far, we depend on the body's amazing repair systems to patch us up. In cut skin, first, capillaries constrict to slow the bleeding. Next, blood cells become sticky and clump together. Eventually, the clot forms a plug that stops blood leaking out. Then, under the scab, cells grow and divide. This is a happy side effect of the prolific cell division that is fueling our growth. The result is a rapid regeneration of skin tissue. In fact, we're so good at healing in our youth, even the scar disappears. By the age of 11, biological childhood is nearly over. The human body has already experienced a drastic transformation. Now comes the biggest change of all, the extraordinary roller coaster ride of puberty. Puberty doesn't stick to a schedule. It can start at any time, depending on our DNA clock, our lifestyle, even our diet. It begins for everyone, regardless of gender, not in the sex organs, but here in the brain. The hypothalamus, the same region that controls body temperature, begins the process. When puberty starts, it releases the protein kisspeptin into the brain. The effect of kisspeptin is to stimulate a chain reaction of hormones throughout the body, until ultimately the sex organs begin to mature. In girls, That means the start of ovulation. On the side of an ovary, an egg, inside a protective, fluid-filled blister. Once the blister ruptures, the egg will make its journey down a fallopian tube. There, it will either be fertilized or later ejected from the uterus in menstruation. Over the next 30 to 40 years, this same monthly journey will be made hundreds of times. But ovaries don't just produce eggs. They start releasing a potent cocktail of hormones into the bloodstream. These will have dramatic and lasting effects on both emotional and physical development. Both sexes experience a dramatic growth spurt. And the entire body changes beyond recognition. As girls become women, boys become men.
Walking home with you, walking down the road.
Male brains also release kisspeptin during puberty, ultimately triggering the testes to start making fertile sperm and the male sex hormone testosterone. It's testosterone that's responsible for the physical changes of manhood. But puberty doesn't only make us physically different. Throughout the brains of both genders, neurons undergo extensive rewiring. Among the torrent of new emotions, teenagers experience sexual attraction for the very first time. A rush of adrenaline actually does set the pulse racing and blood pressure soaring. Lips gorge. Pupils dilate. And cheeks flush. Powerful signals of attraction will be broadcast to the object of our desire. And, sometimes, that desire turns out to be mutual. It's in our 20s our bodies peak. We've stopped growing taller, but we never stop changing. Most tissues and organs are on a continual cycle of renewal as their constituent parts, the cells, continue to divide and multiply at a prolific rate. As old cells die off, new ones replace them. In fact, we even use some of these dead cells to enhance our appearance. Hair, made up of a substance called keratin, consists of dead, modified skin cells. The modified cells are made here in the follicles and then die as new cells push them upwards. Just like hair, nearly all our internal tissues and organs are also renewed over time. We replace blood cells every 4 months. We get a new liver every 2 years. even our bones are replaced every decade. The result is virtually a brand new body every 10 years. Much of this process is driven by the DNA in our cells. But we also have some influence over how our bodies change. We make daily decisions that directly influence how long the body stays at its peak. From our first moments outside the womb, the delicate stereocilia inside the cochlea have been under constant bombardment. With each exposure to loud noise, some of these irreplaceable hair cells become permanently damaged. We don't notice it, but the result is a gradual decline in the frequency range of our hearing. Unfortunately, this kind of hearing damage is unavoidable. But sometimes, we deliberately interfere with the biology of our cells because we enjoy it. A few alcoholic drinks lowers heart rate and blood pressure. But it's the effect on our mental state we notice most. Alcohol actually disrupts the neurons of the brain. While some synapses fire more often, others become blocked. It's these misfiring brain cells that alter our state of mind and help us to lose our inhibitions. And once our guard is down, we're more likely to act on those familiar cues of sexual attraction. The average Briton has sex over 2,500 times in their life, with 5 different partners. But while some nights of passion may satisfy the rush of desire, others can result in dramatic changes in our body, both emotional and physical. In adulthood, the body's development reaches a plateau. We undergo such subtle physical changes, we hardly notice the difference. But there are certain events which can drastically alter us physically and emotionally. Love is much more than an emotion. It's a chemical bombardment of the body over which we have no control. First, the adrenaline rush of lust gets the body racing. It accelerates heart rate and disrupts sleep. Then, once the relationship gains momentum, another hormone comes into play. The brain is overcome with dopamine, the feel-good hormone. As potent as cocaine, it induces euphoria, and its chemical composition makes love highly addictive. After a year or more with the same partner, dopamine is joined by another hormone released during sex. During orgasm, both partners' pituitary glands flood their bodies with oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Oxytocin is the hormone responsible for binding newborns to their mothers, but it also creates a steadfast bond between long-term partners. The more sex we have, the more oxytocin we produce, the stronger the bond. All that oxytocin is about to prove vital. The bond it creates is evolution's way of building an enduring foundation for the trials of parenthood. From an ovary, an egg, the largest cell in the human body, has already erupted and begun the same monthly journey hundreds of others made before it. But while earlier eggs were all lost in menstruation, this one is destined for life. "300 million sperm, by contrast the tiniest human cells, are violently propelled on their journey to the egg. In a case of cellular genocide, the vast majority are immediately killed off by the female body's natural defences. Acidic mucus and an army of white blood cells. The few sperm that do survive swim through the uterus into the fallopian tube where the egg is waiting. Only a few hundred sperm make it this far, and only one will succeed in fertilizing the egg. This truly is survival of the fittest. Only the most viable sperm with the best DNA will survive to pass on its genes. The next profound change in the body is already underway. Often the first symptom of pregnancy is morning sickness. Scientists don't know why pregnant women suffer nausea, but one theory is that it evolved to protect the fetus from toxins in food. Toxins that could harm its delicate organs during this critical phase of development. The mother's body must protect itself against what amounts to a parasitic growth inside her. The fetus saps her energy as it draws what it needs. A specially adapted organ provides a shield between mother and baby. Without the placenta, her immune system would attack and kill her child. Here, the mother's blood passes nutrients across a membrane into the fetal blood, often a different blood type. The uterus is forced to expand up to 1,000 times its normal capacity as the baby inside grows over 800 grams in the first 10 weeks. This enormous growth drastically alters the internal geography of the female body. This woman isn't pregnant, though all her organs are already a tight fit. But in a heavily pregnant body, the organs that used to fill the abdomen and torso are pushed up into the chest. And in addition to being squashed up, organs like lungs and heart have to work harder to maintain the growing baby. So, to make more room, muscles and tendons are suppler and the spine more curved. In late pregnancy, the stomach is compressed to a fraction of its normal size and twisted through 45 degrees, making eating and drinking an uncomfortable experience. The final stages of pregnancy can be unpleasant for the mother, but are nothing compared with the pain of labour. This extraordinary 3D scan shows the narrow exit route through which the baby must be squeezed, including the final twist around the tailbone. Sometimes, when it's too tight a squeeze, the only route to the open is via the surgeon's scalpel.
Frankly, that's the best.
Okay. They look good.
They look great.
Pregnancy and parenthood take their toll on the body, but the march of time also leaves its traces. Though we age throughout adult life, it's only as we approach middle age that we really notice our changing appearance.
Doors closing.
A lifetime of ultraviolet light is responsible for the obvious symptoms, wrinkles. Like all cells in the body, skin cells multiply to replace older, damaged ones. The body sheds an astonishing 30,000 skin cells every minute, generating over 13 kilos of dust by the time we're in our 40s. The result of this rapid skin growth is that skin is never more than a few weeks old, even in middle age. The lines are actually caused by damage to collagen, the protein that binds skin cells together. Accelerated by ultraviolet radiation, a molecular chain reaction degrades the collagen structure. The fibres become flaccid, broken and thin, and it's this that makes skin look older. Also in middle age, we begin to notice the effect of other cells in the body that can never renew themselves. Lens, heart, and some brain cells are among the only cells the body never replaces. So they're exactly the same ones we had as a baby. As we age, our eyes lose the ability to focus light efficiently as the lenses gradually stiffen. At the same time, eyes often feel dry in middle age as glands produce less of the film that lubricates them and fewer tears to flush out debris. Middle age is also characterized by a gradual shift in body shape. Once again, fluctuating hormones are responsible. As levels of several hormones begin to drop, we start losing muscle, around 3 kilos per decade of adult life. It's this muscle loss in middle age that slows down metabolic rate. Muscle cells are our biggest source of the body's inbuilt power plants, mitochondria. Mitochondria process the oxygen we breathe with the nutrients we eat to free up the energy we need. And as our muscle mass decreases, so does the number of mitochondria in our body. So if we continue to eat like we used to, the food we digest is less easily burnt off. It's laid down as an energy store instead. Fat. For some, too many calories and a drop in metabolism can be a lethal combination. Excess fat isn't just stored as an extra inch on the waistline. Inside the abdomen, intestines are smothered in yellow fat deposits. Fat finds its way into nearly every available space, but it's inside the blood vessels where the real harm is done. Deposits build up on the inner walls, narrowing their diameter and forcing the heart to work harder to pump the blood through the restricted vessels. In extreme cases, vessels can become totally blocked. And if this fat builds up in the arteries that supply the heart muscle is starved of the nutrients it needs and risks going into spasm. In other words, a heart attack. Heart disease is currently the biggest killer in the Western world. But it's not just fat that's responsible. Too much stress in middle age can do just as much damage to the cardiovascular system. At the heart of stress is a primal reflex we evolved millions of years ago: fight or flight. Hormones, adrenaline, and cortisol flood from the adrenal glands into the bloodstream. This makes muscles contract, arteries constrict, and heart pump faster, increasing blood pressure. We evolved the fight or flight reflex to enable us to quickly escape or challenge predators. But in the modern world, we're less able to fight or run away from stressful situations, and the body has no release. It's the constant triggering of fight or flight that's so damaging. It causes irreparable harm to the cardiovascular network, speeding up the aging process in our blood vessels. Under the high blood pressure of stress, cells and the artery walls are damaged. They become stiff and thick. Especially here, in the biggest artery, the aorta. Arteries with stiff walls restrict blood flow around the body. In response, the heart works even harder, so blood pressure rises even more. It's a vicious circle. The more stress we experience, the more we damage our blood vessels. And the more damage to our blood vessels, the less able we are to deal with the effects of stress. If stress gets out of control in middle age, the heart can become enlarged as it struggles to force blood through our narrowing, less elastic blood vessels. High blood pressure can also rupture blood vessels in the brain, causing stroke. Most of us suffer from some form of stress, but for women in their 40s and 50s, another change in their bodies compounds the problem. During menopause, the ovaries stop releasing eggs. They also stop producing sex hormones. And the side effect of hormones winding down is to upset the balance in the regions of the brain responsible for mood, sleep, and temperature control. When the hypothalamus is thrown off course, hot flashes occur, moments when the body can't set its thermostat correctly. And it's the menopause ending that's the catalyst for the body's final, fascinating phase of life. The effect of aging on the body is often mistaken for simple wear and tear. But the real explanation for the body's changing appearance can be found in the molecule we carry in our cells since the day we're conceived. DNA. As each cell copies itself over and over again throughout life, the DNA inside is copied with it. But this replication system isn't perfect, and that's the fatal flaw. With each copy, the new DNA is very slightly different. Over a lifetime, we make so many copies from copies that all those differences accumulate. It's just like using a photocopier. Copies made from copies degrade in quality. And because this process occurs throughout the body, as we move from middle to old age, we look very different indeed. But the accumulation of imperfections in DNA doesn't explain all of the symptoms of aging. Some, like osteoporosis, are partly the result of dwindling sex hormones. Even in old age, bone cells are still hard at work destroying old bone and replacing it with new. But changing hormones upset the balance between demolition and repair. Osteoclasts begin to destroy bone faster than osteoblasts can rebuild it. The result is that as the years pass by, bones become increasingly brittle and weak. They slowly crumble. It happens in both sexes, but menopause accelerates bone loss faster in women. While some of the causes of aging originate inside the body, others are the result of breathing a highly reactive gas throughout our lives. As we absorb oxygen through our lungs into our cells, it slowly poisons us. Like tiny furnaces, mitochondria burn food with oxygen, freeing the energy we need to live. But just like any fire, they also produce pollutants. Within mitochondria, the oxygen molecules themselves become damaging chemicals called free radicals. Over the course of our lives, free radicals poison the mitochondria, slowly damaging the inner functions of the cells. With time, DNA becomes so damaged that cells can no longer easily divide and the body can't repair itself efficiently. Imperfections accumulate until eventually tissues fail and organs fail. Natural death, like life, is an amazing biological process, engineered into the cells of the body. Because just as our DNA dictates the timeline of our development, so it puts a cap on how long we can live. Even if we lived in a sterile world, free from accidents and free radicals, our biology would prevent us from living indefinitely. Not only is DNA imperfectly copied, a piece of it also breaks off with each cell division. And after a lifetime of copies, so much DNA is lost, the cells eventually lose the ability to divide altogether. But rather than being like the switching off of a light bulb, natural death is a slow dimming of bodily systems. It's thought that near the moment of death, the heart floods the bloodstream with endorphins, the body's natural painkillers. And as blood flow comes to a halt, tissues are starved of oxygen. Within 10 seconds, the brain's electrical activity drops. 4 minutes later, it's damaged irreversibly. It's thought that hearing is the last sense to go. But even after life has apparently ended, some cells stubbornly cling on to existence. It can be 24 hours before the skin cells stop dividing. And an incredible 37 hours before the last brain cell fires its final impulse. Death is a biological necessity. Without death, we would compete with our children and our children's children for food, space, even for love. We would impair their future. Perhaps we should be content. Our children carry our genes, and they carry our memory. And as we grow old and look back, our children can look forward to a long and extraordinary life, made possible by the biological processes that we take for granted every day of our lives.